Hello and welcome to the EdTPA preview orientation. We will be starting promptly at 9 a.m., so in about 2 minutes. Hello and welcome to the EdTPA preview orientation. We will be starting promptly at 9 a.m., so in about another minute and a half. Thank you. Hello everyone and welcome to the EdTPA preview orientation. We are just about to get started. My name is Tracy Vasquez and I will be with you for the orientation today. I work at Grand Canyon University in the Office of Clinical Practice. Before we get started, I do want you to know all of you are currently muted, and that is to help eliminate background noise. However, we do want this to be a bit interactive, so if you do have a question or a comment throughout the presentation, please raise the hand icon next to your name, and to go ahead and just make sure everyone's following along and you can hear me, please right now practice by raising that hand icon, just so I know you're here and you know the procedures. Perfect, I see a lot of hands. Good, and you can lower your hand by pressing the hand icon again. Perfect. So good, a lot of you are following along and you can hear me. Hopefully if you did not raise your hand, you still are able to hear me. If you're having trouble with the audio through your computer or your device, you can also dial in to a telephone with the audio and receive the audio that way. Sometimes it's a little higher quality. Okay, so we do have a lot of content to cover, so I would like to get started. Again, this is the EdTPA preview orientation for those teacher candidates who will be student teaching in the fall of 2019. So today's topics and objectives, we will be covering the certification rules for those in New York, Georgia, and Wisconsin. We will discuss how EdTPA is a requirement as the professional knowledge assessment. We will go through some of the components of EdTPA, and then how you, as a GCU teacher candidate, can familiarize yourself with available resources and develop a plan of action. So EdTPA has come to be required in your states, Georgia, New York, and Wisconsin, through it being a content pedagogy assessment. And what that means is that it is a student-centered multiple measure assessment of teaching. So let's break that down. When we say it is student-centered, that means the scores are actually looking more at what your students are doing than what you are doing as the teacher. The scores really want to see that the classroom students that you're working with during student teaching are affected by your instruction. So they want to see what the students are able to do. We call it a multiple measure assessment because it isn't just a sit-down test where you are measured in one aspect of your teaching skill. It's going to be multiple measures. And for that reason, there's multiple pieces that you will have to provide to demonstrate your teaching skills. And the evidence pieces will be very structured. You will also be scored on quite a few different rubrics. 15 to 18 rubrics will be used to score your EdTPA. Now, by completing EdTPA, you are demonstrating your teaching pedagogy knowledge. And you're doing that through these very specific pieces of evidence that you're going to submit. Some pieces of evidence are video, and some are written reflections. And you must complete EdTPA while in your student teaching placement. So that's why it's very important that your student teaching placement aligns to the program of study that you're in. And when you're scored, you are scored through a national website when you do your official EdTPA submission for scoring. Okay, are there any questions before we continue? Okay, so let's continue. So a few of the basics about EdTPA. As we stated earlier, EdTPA is a student-centered multiple measure assessment of your teaching skills. It's completed by teacher candidates who will be applying for initial certification in Georgia, New York, and Wisconsin. The reason it is completed is because it is a state requirement for initial teaching certification, but also it does allow you as a teacher candidate to demonstrate your knowledge of pedagogy. Again, teacher candidates must complete EdTPA while in the student teaching placement, and you will be scored through national standards through a national website. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about the assessments. Okay, it looks like we do have a few questions here. So let me just go back one more slide here. And let's go back to the basics. We do have a few questions. So if you do have a question, please raise the hand icon next to your name, and I will be able to unmute you so that you can address the group. It looks like we do have one question here that came in already. Is there a cost? There is a cost for your official EdTPA submission, which will be done through your Pearson e-portfolio. That will be on www.edtpa.com. Students will typically make that official submission for scoring 1 to 2 weeks after student teaching is over, but you do have to work on your EdTPA throughout student teaching. So I recommend that you pay for the EdTPA Pearson e-portfolio at the start of your student teaching. And when you pay, you get access to the electronic portal, and that cost also covers the cost for your official scoring. Now that's all done outside of GCU. That's done through your exam provider, your EdTPA portfolio provider, which is the testing company Pearson. But there is a cost. It is $300. So I suggest that you prepare to have the fee for that cost ready at the start of your student teaching. Someone has a question here. What if I want to wait till I'm done student teaching? You do have to do your EdTPA during student teaching. And the reason for that is you may not have access to a classroom after your student teaching is over. It's also best if you do your EdTPA with a group of students who you have a sustained access to. Whereas if you do your student teaching, maybe you can go pop into a classroom for a few days. You're not really going to get to know those students the same way you do when you're student teaching with them and spending that sustained period. You really want to get to know the students before doing your EdTPA. Also, it is a requirement of your state. So yes, you can wait until you're done student teaching to make that official submission, but make sure you're collecting all of that information during student teaching. Okay, another question. I was wondering, could you still work while doing your student teaching? That is highly discouraged. If you are going to work during student teaching, I suggest you keep it to the weekends only. We have seen students get burned out very quickly trying to work, in the evenings, nights, anything like that would be a bit much. Remember, during student teaching, it's not just like a job. You're learning so much, so your brain is already going to be on a bit of overdrive from everything you're learning. You have a lot to do to prepare for class, the lesson planning, the materials, getting to know the students, and you have also assignments and work to do for your online class that runs at the same time as student teaching. So it is best not to work while student teaching, but if you have to, I would suggest you do it on the weekend. Another question, do we do our training through the LoudCloud modules online? I'm not sure what that is referring to, but I think not. Last time I tried to do that, it cut me out completely. Oh, this is someone who's having trouble with the audio. And remember, if you are having trouble with the audio, you can dial in by phone. Also, we are recording this presentation and we'll be sharing it for later viewing. Another question, how long does it take to get the scores? It takes about a month to get the scores. They do have submission windows where they tell you, for example, anyone who submits their EdTPA Pearson e-portfolio between June 1st and June 15th will receive their score by July 15th, for example. Another question, will we have access to the rubrics beforehand? Yes, all of the rubrics that will score your EdTPA Pearson e-portfolio will be available through your handbook. And we'll talk more about the handbooks in just a minute. Someone asked, when are we starting student teaching? Most student teaching placements start in August and September for the fall semester. You do need to get in contact with your teacher placement specialist or your field experience counselor to find out the exact date that you are starting your student teaching and where you are doing the student teaching at. Someone asked, are there going to be class assignments along with the assignments for EdTPA? Yes, we are going to be talking more about that in just a minute because I do have some specific information to share with you about the assignments. Someone asked, do I have to wait for student teaching to do the EdTPA, or can I do it in my classroom that I'm in now? If you are student teaching in your own classroom, you could probably get started now. That sounds a bit individual, so I think you would have to talk with your counselor a little bit more about that. Okay, we're going to go ahead and move on. I'll get to more of your questions in just a moment. We have a lot of information to cover today, and so your question might get answered as we go on. Let's talk a little bit more about the assessment, and this is the EdTPA assessment. Remember, it's not a sit-down test. It is a portfolio assessment, but I want to share a little bit more about it. So really, EdTPA and the whole coming out of EdTPA has shifted the definition of effective teaching. So previously, teachers were asked to successfully deliver the curriculum, and they would make comments such as, "We got through the material." Now, teachers are really asked to have a positive impact on student learning. And teachers may reflect in ways such as, how have I affected student learning? So you're really thinking about how the students are impacted and not just delivering the instruction. And that really comes down to what we were discussing earlier about EdTPA being student-centered. Remember, it's not so much about what you're doing and how you're delivering the lesson, but it's how the students are responding to the lesson. So think about if you've ever taught a good lesson or even a small group lesson. What are some of the things that you notice when the lesson is going really well and the students are learning? What kinds of things do the students do to demonstrate their learning? Think about that for just a second. Okay, now I want to give you an overview of the EdTPA portfolio. In your EdTPA portfolio, you will compile a 3 to 5 lesson unit. So you could call that a mini unit. EdTPA refers to it as a learning segment, 3 to 5 lessons. So it's one content area taught over the course of a week. So you might be a secondary math teacher, high school math, where you may only see those students Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and you teach them a mini unit that week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. You're going to have a 3-lesson unit. But it is up to you if you want to do 3 or 5 lessons. Your learning segment is going to be focused on one content area, one topic. For example, if you are a math teacher, you may do something on adding mixed numbers, fractions, and that will be taught over the course of the week, your 3 to 5 lesson unit. Now, your EdTPA portfolio is broken into 3 tasks. The first task is going to demonstrate that you are effective in planning instruction and assessment. So think about all of the evidence related to the first task, demonstrating your competency planning. The next task is going to be more focused on the implementation of the instruction. So it will demonstrate you are effective instructing and engaging students in learning. And the third task will be more focused on assessment. So all of the evidence for task 3 is intended to demonstrate you are effective assessing student learning. And there is attention to academic language and analyzing teaching throughout. What that means is, throughout all of the evidence pieces for task 1, task 2, and task 3, you have to pay careful attention to academic language and analyzing your own teaching. and we will talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. And the evidence pieces for your EdTPA portfolio will be a combination of candidate commentaries. These are like a digital worksheet that you will complete answering prompts and reflecting on your teaching. You also need to include instructional artifacts, including student work, and 1 to 2 unedited video clips of teacher-student interaction. And those video clips do need to be of you teaching the learning segment. Okay, let's go on. So the artifacts, the evidence pieces that you submit for your EdTPA are judged on 5 components of teaching practice. You'll see the first 3 there do align with the individual tasks we discussed earlier. So you'll be judged on your planning competency, your instruction competency, implementing instruction, your assessment competency, your competency analyzing teaching, and your competencies instructing and using academic language. So your students will need to use academic language. You will need to support and develop their use of academic language, but you will also need to model academic language. So you do provide evidence for analyzing teaching and academic language across all tasks. I also want to make sure all of the teacher candidates on the line today who are in an elementary program, which means you will be an elementary school teacher, you do have to do also a task 4, which is elementary mathematics assessment. All other EdTPA portfolios are just task 1, 2, and 3. Remember, all of those are centered around the learning segment. Now, here's an overview of task 1. So I remember I did state earlier that each task requires multiple pieces of evidence. So you'll see that here in A, B, C, D, and E. Task 1 is all about demonstrating you are effective planning for instruction and assessment. So to do that, you first need to fill out a template that has information about your class and your students. Next, you will need to prepare your learning segment. So you will identify a central focus or a central objective for your learning segment that will be taught over the course of a week, 3 to 5 consecutive lessons. You can do that on a lesson plan template of your choice. But remember, you do need 3 individual lesson plans at a minimum, 3 to 5. You cannot use a veteran teacher planning chart and include it all there. You have to use a full lesson plan template, such as the College of Education lesson plan template. And when you're planning, you also need to take into consideration the language demands. How will you help students with those academic language demands? Write out the lesson plans. Then you will include instructional materials or pictures of your instructional materials and the assessments that you will use. Blank copies of all written assessments do need to be included. This is both formative and summative assessments. And you'll need to do the planning commentary. So that planning commentary is what I mentioned earlier, that it's a reflective written piece that you will need to complete. So it looks a bit like a digital worksheet where there's question prompts, and you'll have to answer those prompts at length. Sometimes multiple paragraphs, sometimes tables and charts need to be included, but these commentaries are a very big deal, and you will have a commentary as a part of each task. So the first task has a planning commentary because it's all focused on your competency planning. So that's an overview of task 1. Now I want to share with you an overview of task 2. So remember, task 2 is all about competency instructing, implementing that instruction. Now, task 2 does include video clips. So you will need to submit video clips of your teaching the learning segment in the classroom. Now, the clips are going to have to be a specific length, 1 to 2 clips, no more than 10 minutes each. It is common for students to do 2 clips because you might want to show one clip where it's mostly student-led, or teacher-led, and then you might want to show another clip where it's more student-led to kind of show how you can vary your instruction and your role in the instructional process. The video clips do have to be unedited, and you actually do have to upload the video clip. You cannot just provide a link. So usually that's going to be in like an MP4 format. So to do the video clip, hopefully you'll be able to spend some time examining your plans for the learning segment, carefully identify lessons to video record, complete the video recording, and select the clips carefully. Make sure we can see and hear well in the clip. And then for task 2, you also have to do a commentary template. So that's the instruction commentary template. Okay, that's task 2. And now, task 3. Now, task 3 is, remember, going to help you demonstrate your effective assessing student learning. Now, when you're teaching a learning segment or mini unit, you most often do have multiple assessments throughout. You may have a thumbs up assessment, a formative assessment, or you might have a short quiz that's paper pencil. Now, when you're determining which assessment from the learning segment you will use, I would probably suggest that you do the more paper pencil variety of the assessment. So it might be a bit more summative. So the first thing you do is determine which assessment from the learning segment you will use. Now, this assessment does have to have a very particular format, so it's not something that you can just copy out of a teacher's edition. You're probably going to have to create it yourself. Next, you do need to include the evaluation criteria. So that's not the assessment. The assessment is what the students complete. The evaluation criteria is what you use to evaluate the student work, whether that be an answer key, a rubric. How are you scoring that assessment? Then you will analyze the student work, which includes the grading and the analyzing of how the students did. Were there patterns? Did all of the students miss the third question? Why did they miss that? This is where you might make some charts and tables. You do need the student work samples. Most of you will need 3 work samples. Our student teachers in special education will only have 1 focus student, but most of you will have 3 focus students. You do need to collect their work samples for the assessment, referred to in component section A. Remember, this is part of your learning segment, so this should be mentioned in 3 to 5 lessons that you wrote in task 1. And then you also need to do task 3, assessment commentary. So this is that lengthy digital worksheet that you will complete discussing the assessment and how it went. Okay, now for those of you who are student teaching elementary, who want to become certified to teach elementary, you are going to have to do task 4. And task 4 is assessing students' mathematics learning. And the reason elementary students have to do a task 4 is because you will have to do English language arts for your content in the first 3 tasks for your learning segment. And then this task 4 is going to be demonstrating your math competencies, your competency teaching and assessing math. So the component sections for task 4, should you have to do it, you need to include a mathematics context for learning information template, a learning segment overview. This is different from the lesson plans that you wrote in the first task, because remember, those lesson plans were full lesson plans written on a template individually. For this, you're just going to be completing the learning segment overview template to plan out your lessons. Then you will do a re-engagement lesson plan. So that's an additional lesson plan, helping reteach some areas that the students were struggling with. Then you will need 3 focus students work samples from the re-engagement lesson plan. And you will need to do a bit of a commentary evaluating the effectiveness of the re-engagement lesson. Now I want to talk to you a little bit about the subject-specific handbooks. Now you know, as a GCU teacher candidate, you have a handbook for student teaching, your student teaching manual. That tells you all about student teaching as a GCU student. But it does not contain any information about EdTPA. So EdTPA has their own subject-specific handbooks. So hopefully you can pick yours off the screen here. Remember, your subject-specific handbook does have to align with the program of study that you're enrolled in at GCU, your student teaching placement classroom, and the certification that you're seeking for when you graduate. So all those do need to be aligned. For example, if you are in our GCU elementary education program, you will be student teaching in an elementary classroom, teaching most likely all subject areas, but at a minimum you need to be teaching English language arts and math so that you can do this. And you will be seeking to be certified in elementary education in your state. So the elementary education handbook is called Literacy EdTPA with Mathematics Assessment Task, because remember, you have that task 4 included. Secondary mathematics would be appropriate if you are in our GCU secondary education program, you're student teaching in high school mathematics, and you want to be certified to teach secondary mathematics in your state. If you are unsure of the handbook that you will be selecting, you will need to talk to your field experience counselor. Okay, someone has a question here. What if you are doing special education and elementary? If you're in that program, that is a dual program, everyone will still only do one official EdTPA for scoring. Most of our students who are in that dual program do end up doing their special education EdTPA, but you will have to make that decision. Same thing with early childhood. Early childhood students here at Grand Canyon University do a placement working with babies, and then they do a placement working with a primary grade. So it's up to you if you want to do the early childhood handbook or the elementary education handbook. I suggest you speak more with your field experience counselor about that in terms of what you want to be certified to teach. Okay, let's move on here. We will have a bit more time for questions at the end. Let's talk a little bit more about student teaching. Now, when you are in your student teaching placement, you are also taking online courses for student teaching. It's either going to be one course throughout the entire 15 weeks, or it will be 8 weeks and 8 weeks to align with a 16-week student teaching placement. And you will have to complete the requirements of your online coursework. So your online coursework will have discussion forums and participation. There will also be a step. I'll talk more about that in just a second. You'll have to do a professional portfolio and sometimes other miscellaneous assignments, such as a resume or classroom management plan. And you will have evaluations from your faculty supervisor and documentation of hours. So the evaluations are when your supervisor comes to visit you and evaluates you on a form, gives you a score, and that counts towards your grade, and your documentation of hours in the classroom. Remember, you do have to be in your student teaching placement full-time, and you document those hours on your clinical practice activity log. Your supervisor does sign off on that and submit that for you. Now, you see the asterisk there beside STEP. Now, STEP is a portfolio, but you will not do this portfolio because you are doing the EdTPA portfolio, your Pearson E portfolio. So the two portfolios that you will be working on are the EdTPA portfolio and the professional portfolio. The professional portfolio is an assignment that you will do in your online coursework, and the EdTPA portfolio is what you're working on during student teaching so that you can submit your EdTPA for scoring at the end of student teaching. You will not be doing the STEP, and for that reason, you will be doing modified student teaching submissions to align with evidence for the EdTPA portfolio. So the weeks where other students in your online course are working on STEP assignments, those are the weeks that you will be working on EdTPA portfolio evidence pieces. So you will use the modified student teaching submission schedule to follow along. So remember, you will not be doing the STEP. You should be doing the modified student teaching submissions so that you're working on EdTPA throughout student teaching. So for those of you in Georgia, New York, and Wisconsin, you will have to submit weekly discussion and participation. You will participate in modified submission tasks in the EdTPA space, and you will submit modified submission deliverables in the online course assignment Dropbox. Now, I wanted to share with you a little bit more about academic language. Someone has a good question here regarding the modified submissions. Will we be responsible to inform our professors of that, or will they have that note? I would suggest you notify your instructor by sending them an individual forum message at the start of class that you are in New York, Georgia, or Wisconsin, and you will be doing the modified submission schedule so that you can work on your EdTPA. Someone asked, do I need to complete EdTPA during my student teaching time? Yes, you do need to collect all of the evidence pieces that you need for your EdTPA during student teaching. And then if you want to, you can submit right away during student teaching, or you can take that 1 to 2 weeks after you have finished your student teaching placement to really full-time get it all organized and submitted. Okay, so academic language may sound sound like a term that you're unfamiliar with, but it's really not. So academic language is the language of the discipline. That's the content that you're teaching, that students need to participate and engage in meaningful ways in the content area. So what words are they using? How are they able to discuss this content? It's by using oral and written language. So academic language is the means by which students develop and express content understandings. So you may have learned about this, particularly in those courses that you take regarding teaching English language to second language learners. Do you remember learning about language objectives, language supports, reading, writing, listening, and speaking? These are all the ways that academic language is used in the classroom. And specific ways that academic language is used by students to demonstrate their disciplinary understanding. So as a teacher, think about these questions, because I think your answer to these questions will help demonstrate that you are supporting academic language in the classroom. What do they know? They being the classroom students. What do your classroom students know? What can they do? And what can they use language to demonstrate? So how can they use language to demonstrate their knowledge pertaining to a specific topic? What are they reading, writing, listening, speaking, demonstrating, or performing? So we are going to focus on these language demands for your EdTPA. Vocabulary, language functions, syntax, and discourse. Now, I'm not going to get into all of that right now, but when you pick out your EdTPA subject-specific handbook that we discussed a little bit earlier, you will find that towards the back of that handbook, there is a glossary. This is a snapshot from the elementary education glossary that really helps you understand each term. So if you want a refresher on what is discourse and how are they referring to that here, take a look in the glossary. Now let's talk about what's next. Actually, I'm going to take a couple questions here. Would anyone like to raise their hand and ask a question? Yolanda? Yolanda? Go ahead and ask your question. Oh, it looks like for some reason we can't hear you, so we might come back to you. Let's go to Tasha. Tasha, did you have a question? Tasha, you are self-muted. Okay, we'll have to come back to you. Sonia? Hi, Sonia.
Well, hi, hear me?
Yes, we can.
I do have a question. What's next? I mean, what
Okay,
is
that's
next
perfect.
after this?
That's perfect. I'm glad you asked. So yeah, we'll just go ahead and go on then, because next we do have a course workshop for you. You're not starting that today, but you will need to take that prior to student teaching. So I'll just go ahead and get back to our presentation here. So the next thing is the course workshop. It's called Performance Assessment Skills for Teachers. PAST. So as you know, EdTPA is a performance assessment because it is an assessment of your performance teaching. And so before you complete the performance assessment, which is your EdTPA, we want to make sure you have the skills you need to be successful doing EdTPA. EdTPA is very difficult, and there are some skills we want to make sure you are prepared with. So before you start student teaching, which is when you do your EdTPA, we want to give you these skills. And we've compiled all of these skills into a 5-stage course workshop. There's a pre-stage, a planning stage, and you'll see those first 3 stages align with the tasks for EdTPA. So you know task 1 is planning. The stage 1 of this workshop is learning all about planning and task 1. Stage 2 is about instruction, implementing instruction in task 2. Stage 3 is about assessment, how you will be using assessment for your task 3. And stage 4 is about program-specific requirements. So we'll be talking about things such as elementary task 4, or special education using one focus student. Anything that's more program specific. And then stage 5 is more of a transition. So you're going to be going through what to do next as you get into student teaching and starting your EdTPA, using the PLN, which is our professional learning network, the webinars that will be available to you throughout EdTPA and student teaching, LoudCloud and what you're going to be looking for in your LoudCloud student teaching class, and finding peer partners. So that's kind of the agenda for the PAST course workshop. That will be coming up next. So here's a little bit of a timeline so you can follow along. So prior to student teaching, you have the PAST timeline. PAST is that course workshop. So all that red, brown, yellowish arrow, that's all prior to student teaching. And then comes the EdTPA, which is during student teaching. That's the blue. And then the green is after student teaching. So let's go through this. First, look at the far left of your screen. Prior to student teaching, you do the pre-stage of PAST. You do stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, stage 5. This is all done 2 to 3 months prior to student teaching. But the course workshop itself only lasts about 2 weeks. And then stage 5 is the final completion of PAST. You will be getting a certificate for that, which you will be handing in to your student teaching course instructor. In student teaching, you'll have the student teaching course and placement start. And then in week 2, your EdTPA modified submission schedule starts. You have student teaching, which is a 15 or 16-week time frame, depending upon your program. And then comes your graduation and official EdTPA submission. Once you have your passing scores for that, you will apply for institutional recommendation and apply for state certification. Of course, we don't have on here Any additional requirements that you may need for your state certification, such as your content exam or GACE, but you do also need anything related to that matter before you apply for your institutional recommendation and state certification. So you can talk more with your field experience counselor about any additional requirements you may have. So here's some steps that you can take right now. You can review the PLN resources with particular attention to EdTPA resources. The PLN resources are our Professional Learning Network resources. I'll show you a quick peek of that. So when you log into our Professional Learning Network, you're going to sign in with your GCU portal login credentials. And then this is all in support of Grand Canyon University clinical practice and student teaching. But to find the EdTPA resources, you're going to go to Groups, and then click on EdTPA. And this is where you'll see things such as the student teaching modified submissions for LoudCloud, that modified submission schedule, the EdTPA handbooks and templates, recordings of our EdTPA study groups, the EdTPA Wall of Success, and various other resources related to EdTPA. Next step is select the appropriate assessment handbook. Access the handbook for your content. Review your subject area assessment handbook and the associated rubrics. The rubrics are in the handbook. Become familiar with filming and reflecting. The first time you do a recording in your classroom should not be for your EdTPA. You should practice filming and reflecting on your instruction. Even before student teaching, you can practice filming and reflecting. Practice reading a children's book. Practice working through a math problem. You'll notice some things that will be helpful so that you can make some changes. Prepare to register on Pearson's website, www.edtpa.com. This is where you register for your Pearson e-portfolio, where you will officially submit your EdTPA for scoring. You can explore that website as well, edtpa.com. This is also where you are going to pay the fee. That $300 fee to Pearson is through edtpa.com. Next, you will review the modified submission schedule. And when you receive the email with information on starting PAST, that's the skills workshop, please log in to the Professional Learning Network and plan completion of your 5 stages of PAST. Remember, that's going to be the 1 to 2 week time frame. You're going to receive an email about that, so stay posted. Now, I also encourage you to review these resource sites. As mentioned earlier, edtpa.com. Vimeo is a video sharing website. The makers of EdTPA have posted some video resources for you there. And then, of course, our Professional Learning Network that I showed you earlier, pln.gcu.edu. And you can log in with your GCU portal login credentials. This is the Professional Learning Network that I showed you earlier. On the Professional Learning Network, there's a few things that you can do. You can set up your profile, connect with groups, post into relevant discussions, check the calendar for upcoming events and webinars, review and comment on PLN news updates, and visit the resources space to obtain helpful materials and links. Get ready for your EdTPA work. Take the Performance Assessment Skills for Teachers course workshop. Register at edtpa.com. Review the Professional Learning Network resources. And speak to your field experience counselor to ensure the appropriate subject-specific EdTPA assessment for you and your program. And know that you can get EdTPA support when you start student teaching, and even before. We have the Performance Assessment Skills for Teachers workshop for you this summer in July. And then you will be getting an email about that to tell you exactly which date in July you can get started. You can always reach out to your field experience counselor. We have a team of clinical practice mentors who will be hosting the EdTPA webinars this fall. And then myself, Tracy Vasquez, the clinical practice specialist. And the EdTPA inquiry ticket is available on the PLN. That's where you can go to submit to discuss any trouble that you're having so that you can get some support related to EdTPA. Any other support during student teaching can go through your field experience counselor. So the EdTPA support, of course, you have the Performance Assessment Skills for Teachers, ongoing webinar links. Those are all sent through email, so make sure you are paying attention to your email this summer and during student teaching. PLN viewing and posting available any time of day and night. And your peers in New York, Georgia, and Wisconsin can be contacted on the PLN. You can make connections with your peers in there. Then as student teaching begins, you will begin the Context for Learning Information template. Remember, that's the first piece of evidence that you'll start on related to Task 1. Talk with your cooperating teacher about EdTPA and obtain signed video recording permission forms from the parents and guardians of the students in your class. Now, having completed this EdTPA preview orientation, I have recorded all of your emails. We are going to send you all an email with your EdTPA preview orientation completion certificate. It looks like that box, EdTPA preview orientation. So there's going to be 3 quick questions for you to answer. Don't worry about right or wrong. That's for me, just so that I know what you got out of this orientation today. I do ask that you complete this orientation certificate within 24 hours. As soon as you complete it and submit it, it's through our document management system. So you receive a copy, an electronic copy to your inbox, your email, and then I will also receive an electronic copy. So that way I will know and record that you have attended the EdTPA preview orientation. And then I will know that you are ready to receive the email about your Performance Assessment Skills for Teachers course workshop. I'm also going to send you a copy of the slides from the presentation today so that you can review them at your leisure. And we do have just a couple minutes left for any additional questions. So let's see here. If you are listening in with someone for today's presentation, maybe if both of you are at the same school and you just decided to attend together, you may not receive the email with the certificate, but if you email me at coe@gcu.edu, again, that's coe@gcu.edu, we can take care of you that way. Again, that's College of Education at coe@gcu.edu. Someone says, yes, this is a lot of information. Will it get easier? It will get easier if you go in with your eyes wide open. And that's why we have compiled this skills workshop for you to do this summer, because it will really equip you with the skills that you need to be successful. Yes, coe@gcu.edu, perfect. The alternative timeline, will that be provided to us? That is posted in the PLN, so I do encourage you to get into the Professional Learning Network, log in with your GCU portal credentials, and remember, click on Groups and EdTPA, and you will see all of the EdTPA resources. Remember, this was really just an overview. You don't have to remember all of this right now. We're going to be going through everything in the workshop, that 1 to 2 week workshop. So I do want to be cognizant of time. So I do want to get us out on time. So thank you for attending today. If you do have any follow-up questions that you're concerned about, please email me at coe@gcu.edu. My name is Tracy. Thank you for attending today, and thank you for make sure you do your certificate within 24 hours. Okay, bye-bye.